Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 205 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Colin Whiteley. And today's episode is on how does social media impact mental health? And it is Saturday the 20th of May 2023 as I record this. And today's episode might seem like common sense because, of course, we know that mental health does negatively impact mental health. But to celebrate the release of my brand new social media psychology book, I actually want to read a chapter from it which basically sets up the rest of the book, because social media, yes, it can harm our mental health, but it can also benefit it and help us with social connections. So social media is definitely not as bad as everyone thinks, but of course it's not as good as everyone thinks either, depending on which side of the argument that you're on. So it's really interesting, really informative, and I really did enjoy writing this book, so I know you're going to love today's episode, which is based on a chapter of it. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there are only 2 news articles today. So the first one is really interesting if you love cognitive psychology. So the first one is sound and sensation may be university linked. Listening to music can trigger goosebumps, send shivers down your spine, or get you on the dance floor. Unless you're me, I'm never on the dance floor. But does music trigger the same bodily sensations in people from different cultures? A new study from Vesper Perkins at the University of Uran, Finland, and colleagues suggest that this just might be the case. The team also found consistent links between patterns of bodily sensations and specific emotions, suggesting that these physical sensations play a crucial role in our emotional responses to music. So personally, I really quite like this one level because I absolutely love cross-cultural research. Absolutely love it because I find it fascinating how that there are certain trends of behavior that do seem to be universal for all humans, regardless of their culture, their language, and their upbringing. That I find absolutely fascinating. That certain behaviors are basically in our DNA. But what I also find really interesting is when there are behaviours that only develop in certain cultures. For example, in collectivist and in individualistic cultures, that's also really interesting. So cross-cultural research, if I was ever going into academia and not doing clinical psychology, I would definitely be studying cross-cultural research because I find it fascinating. So I also find it really interesting that music seems to be universal, and I guess that this makes sense though, because in all human cultures, storytelling, music, all of those sort of entertainment things that actually bring people together and actually help us form communities, that is really important, and it's actually critical to our survival. So I guess it shouldn't be surprising that it's university linked, that we have responses to certain types of music, but equally it sort of is that way because, of course, music is definitely not innate. Our drive to create something like it might be innate, but I'm not a biological psychologist, so I can't say that with too much confidence. But it's interesting that our bodies and our brains are to some extent programmed, I say in air quotes, to respond in certain ways. So really interesting stuff to know. No, actually, like, I've just remembered that there actually like, is a third one. So the second one is, do similar personalities make for a perfect match? Generally speaking, we tend to have something in common with our romantic partners, whether there be similar interests, backgrounds, or personalities. Whether we grow up to be more similar with time or choose someone with a similar traits to ourselves, however, is still an open question. New work by Jessica D. Lee Marie and Anton Lee from the University of Stirling suggests that we do gravitate towards potential partners with personalities similar to us, but only for certain traits. And I'm definitely agree with her. Or I can definitely understand the sort of arguments over, because I'm actually not going to dive into traits that people do actually gravitate towards and which ones they don't. But just for the sake of argument, I really cannot see a really extroverted person being really in love and madly wanting to be with a massive introvert, basically complete polar opposites that were. That I think would be quite interesting though, because you're one person who always wants to go out and be with other people, and then there's another person who always wants to sort of have less stimulation and less outgoing though. So really interesting. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with either of those. I'm quite introverted, to be honest, compared to other people. But okay, no, but it is interesting. And I always think the sort of relationship psychology aspects are always quite good because I know you've got the similarity match hypothesis or that sort of argument. I can't quite remember the exact phrasing of it off the top of my head, but it says that that's where it's like similar people, because let's face it, the old adage or the old saying of opposites attract, that has never been supported by research, I think. I think that is literally just a saying that people use. And for some reason, I don't understand why. But research in social relationships and romantic relationships is always important and always quite a lot of fun to read though, because in psychology we tend to read a lot about the negatives of human behaviour, like social media and how it impacts mental health, and more of the clinical research. But to have something that's quite light-hearted is actually really good, and it does make a very nice change. So the last one is, and this one I do like, if misinformation is a virus, we can create a vaccine. Over at The Psychologist, David Robinson interviews Santa Diggin Linden on the building blocks of conspiracy theories and how they work with tech giants like Google to inoculate people against them. And I really do recommend that interview over at the BPS's website because it is really good. And as always, I'm always behind on The Psychologist. I'm quite concerned that I'm about a year behind now, with all of my issues stacked up in the corner by my writing desk. I will get to them at some point. But the idea of inoculation theory, I think is absolutely brilliant, because I've actually used it in one of my essays on my exams, and in a preparation for my exam, I've been reading tons of information on inoculation theory, and it's really quite amazing and quite staggering how big some of researchers actually want to take inoculation theory. A theory though, because online herd immunity is a bit worse if you inoculate other people online with these mental health vaccines, basically, then it is a perfectly possible whether these inoculations can actually spread through entire social communities. That's entire Facebook groups, entire websites, entire communities. And I think that's amazing because the problem with physical inoculation is, of course, you can only do it one at a time. But some of the papers I've been reading on psychological inoculation, they've been talking about doing thousands of people at once, and that would absolutely be amazing. And to be honest, it would be the only thing that could ever stop conspiracy theories. dead in their tracks basically, because right now we don't have something that effective against conspiracy theories and misinformation. But if we can create a really effective vaccine, then that could honestly be game changing. And I would absolutely love a psychologist to be able to do that. I think that would absolutely be brilliant. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. This week's been rather interesting, to be honest, though, because it's been quite sort of not so much game changing, but something quite similar. Because this week was my final exam at university, and at the end of it, I realised I'm actually done having my degree. Everything is in the hands of the markers, and then I will graduate in January. And I wasn't really, to be honest, this had never hit me before now that I'm actually finishing off my undergraduate degree. And to be honest, it had also sort of changed on the Monday, because that's when I found out that I got an 82 in a critical review that I wrote, which, believe me, is the highest mark I've ever gotten. And it's like 30 points up, higher than I was getting in like my second year, which which I was utterly shocked about, and I was really pleased though. So 82, I was really pleased with, and because I've got that 82, it sort of made me realise, oh right, I can get a 2-1 overall. So I was really shocked, and to be honest, it sort of made, because for my masters, which I really want to do at Kent, same place I'm at now, I have to get a 2-1. And let's just say my academic essays are rather interesting. Well, I've sort of had a very sorted past though, because of course they don't teach you how to write academically at university, and because of how university payment is structured, at least at my university, they don't give you good feedback, so you can't improve. And the learning support services are, when I went there once, and I only went there once, they were quite lacking. So I really was not that impressed. So to be honest, unless you're naturally gifted at academic writing, then it is an absolute struggle for you. Thankfully, I did my placement, and the amazing people on my placement really did help me, so I'm able to get the grades I'm getting this year. Anyway, that was a minor tangent. But anyway, so my point is that it basically changed this week. That I realised I am going to get a 2-1 overall, absolute minimum. I might be able to get higher, and then I will be able to do my masters. And that was a really great thing to realise. And so I'm definitely looking forward to my graduation. I definitely think I'm going to miss my undergrad, because my undergraduate's been great, especially this year. I've met great people, made great friends, and yeah, this has just been an absolute brilliant year. So what I'm actually going to say to all of you though, is in case there is any psychology students actually listening, I would just say that is that your degree will definitely be filled with surprises. Because the 82, that was a massive surprise. I knew in the critical review that I was doing, I would definitely do well, like high 2-1. I did not expect an 82, so I'm really pleased. And this is what I also saying back on episode 200, is make sure you enjoy your psychology journey as you're going there, because I'm just realising that my psychology journey is basically over for my undergraduate, and it's done. I've really enjoyed it, and now I'm looking forward to my next step of my journey though. So definitely enjoy it whilst you can. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci I always love to hear from all of you, because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Social Media Psychology, a guide to clinical psychology, cyberpsychology, and depression. So this is an absolute brilliant book that I'm really glad is finally being released everywhere, because social media, we all sort of just know intuitively that social media does negatively impact mental health. But how? How does social media negatively impact mental health? But also, though, is the social media really as a cut and dry line as that? Because I know a lot of people, they use social media, they don't have negative mental health, and they actually say that social media actually helps their mental health. So why is that? Very really easy to understand book actually explains that in engaging at depth and using a lot of psychology research though. So we look at so what is the social media literature like in psychology? What are the positives of social media for mental health and the negatives? But also, what are the different types of social media use? But this is really interesting because you've got passive social media use and active social media use. So all of them are really important. And depending on how you use social media, not necessarily how social media is itself, even though that does play like part of it, that actually has more of an impact on whether your mental health is positively or negatively impacted by social media. So this is a great, really easy to understand book that I absolutely love. It was a lot of fun writing up. So that's Social Media Psychology, a guide to clinical psychology, cyberpsychology, and depression. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Connor Whiteley. So what was the podcast and the creation of the podcast? Is sponsored by you buying books. My time in the creation of the show is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And if you wanted to provide some monthly support and get tons of other great benefits, like early access, more behind the scenes footage, and a sort of closer relationship to me as the podcast will create on a monthly basis for a few euros, dollars, pounds, or whatever your currency is a month, then you too can become a patron at patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. I'm really glad that I actually got that right today, because normally I say Connor Whiteley, which was the old Patreon address. So I hope you enjoy the personal update. Let's move on to the content parts of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how social media impacts mental health. So let's dive into it. I'm going to lay the groundwork for the rest of the book in terms of mental health, since in the last chapter we definitely spoke about mental health and how it relates to social media, but now we're going to dive into it even further, which is just critical, so the rest of the book makes sense and why we're looking at the different topics that we are. Therefore, given that social media has been reported to produce both negative and positive effects within different people, Get Low and all 2019, we do need to question who is at greater risk on social media platforms. Is it those with mental health conditions or those without? One example of this sort of thinking can be seen in Primark and Escobar Vida 2017, who noted the possibility for social media to negatively impact people with depression and a person's subjective well-being. Crons and all 2013. Then just to emphasise how complex this all is, despite the findings of Primark and Escobar v. 2017. There have been several case studies via reports that show possible evidence for social media being a useful and not harmful tool for people with mental health conditions, especially amongst people who are considered to be reclusive, as social media can help them to improve their social integration and connections with other people with stigmatizing mental health conditions. In addition, social media has been cited as playing a major role in the long war, my words, but hardly an exaggeration, against the stigma around mental health conditions. Other people have compared it to an ongoing battle, but the long war is definitely what it feels like. Believe me, it really does. The reason for this is because there are positives and negatives of social media for mental health stigma, since it does allow people to share their own thoughts and experiences with other people who could benefit from these social exchanges. Burton and all 2015. However, as a personal note, you also get trolls and other idiots, and yes, I'm definitely calling them that, who were bang on about how people with mental disorders, can't believe they call them that still, need to be locked up, shot, or cleansed for religious reasons, or to stop them from further polluting the human gene pool. And yes, I have seen all of that. Whenever I see comments like that, I seriously laughed because like those people are just stupid. Seriously stupid. How stupid these commentators are, and just how little they understand of how these so-called mental disorders and illnesses work. And of course, they're not disorders, they're not illnesses, they're mental health conditions. Then I tend to feel sad because of the sheer amount of damage that these commentators are doing with their toxic views. Anyway, social media use, as well as the oppression in particular, seems to be closely linked, with a great amount of social media use being associated with a greater risk of developing major depression disorder. Allen and all 2020, and a bunch of other references. Self-injurious behaviour and suicidal idealization, George 2019, as well as suicide rates, Twin Journal 2018. In addition, research suggests that people with depression might experience social media differently compared to people without depression. For example, social media might have a negative effect on those with depression, and people with depression might experience decreased social activity on social media. The Chowdhury in all 2013, and they might have fewer social media interactions compared to control groups in research. Nevertheless, Park and all 2013 found that people with depression thought of social media to be a tool for them and others to become more socially aware and to have more emotional interaction compared to people without depression who describe social media as an information consuming and sharing tool. In my opinion, I can definitely see where these studies are coming from. I don't have depression, and as I mentioned earlier, I tend to use my personal social media accounts to learn what my friends and family are up to, and I'm part of a few Facebook groups that is all about learning and asking questions about a certain topic, as well as on my Twitter list of profiles, for which I have to admit I really don't use anymore, because I just, because of what I used to do, is that I used to check my the profiles on my Twitter list daily or release regularly, but I've not done that for months. I want to learn what these people are doing and what they have to share with me. And in case you're wondering, the people on my Twitter list, they seriously are not celebrities or anyone too important. They just tend to be author friends that share interesting articles from time to time, and I can learn from. In fact, I think the only celebrity that I do have on Twitter, well before he deleted his social media account because he was so badly bullied, bless him, was the amazing Joe Locke. But as I said, it's just such a shame that he was badly bullied on there, and he was seriously trolled. Disgusting people. But my point is, I do tend to use my social media accounts in form information gathering and social interactions. Anyway, the reason why we're looking at these studies is that they are actually very important, and their significance can't really be overstated, as they all highlight a possible negative mechanism within people with depression that result in, even though these people use social media less for interaction compared to non-depressed people, these people still see their interaction on social media to be an important and essential function of social media. As well as the reason why this is bad is because even though they might feel like they're getting benefits from these online interactions, the social media use might increase the feelings of loneliness, leading to negative effects. Carcel and Frigioni, 2011. As a result, this could suggest that these negative outcomes from social media might work at least in part by the mechanism of social media's perceived purpose. And before I actually go on to the next bit, let's take a moment to consider what that actually means, because this really is all about perception. Again, one of the most important things in clinical psychology. So, as I'm fairly sure, that time when I was talking about what I've used social media for, you probably haven't agreed, and that doesn't make me or you wrong at all. It just means that we both think social media has a different purpose. For example, in terms of concrete purposes, the purpose of a social media for me is to learn and interact with groups and reach amazing as well as interactive readers. And I've had some great conversations. Thank you if you're one of them. Again, this is only my perception, and yours will probably be completely different, but it's the idea of personal perception that is so important here. Therefore, this perceived purpose is important because the repressed people don't have the same levels of interaction and support as they perhaps expect, and the real-world social support network might be rather small. In addition, social media platforms like Facebook can be used by people to develop as well as maintain social connectiveness, which has been shown by research to be associated with decreased depression and anxiety, and in improvements to quality of life. Grief and all 2013. As a result, people with depression might therefore struggle to develop a social media derived connectiveness because they're having fewer interactions when they're online. So this could lead to them increasing or maintaining their levels of depression, leading to exacerbating the negative outcomes associated with the condition. Moreover, broader research into social media suggests that online social interaction, or in this case a lack of social interaction, is at the epicenter of the negative social media related outcomes, like mental health difficulties, the psychological distress it causes, and how it links within various mental health conditions, as well as potentially the perception of what social media is used for, and by extension, the perception of how other people use it. Because as we near the end of the chapter, we all need to get one thing very straight right now. we all need to understand that the relationship between depression and social media isn't as simple as social media only being negative towards the oppressed people, because it could have potential benefits that we'll explore later on in more depth. But to perhaps give you a little taster, it's worth noting that researchers found that social media has been found to act as an effective adjacent therapy for treatment-resistant anxiety and depression, Vice in all 2020. And social media has been associated with a decline in depressive symptoms when used to strengthen pre-existing relationships. Therefore, even from those two quick examples, we can all start to see that the social media and the oppression relationship is very complex, and it isn't as a clean cut as perhaps any of us thought before we studied this book. Consequently, social media may have different outcomes based on the way that people use it, such as if people use the social media to strengthen pre-existing social relationships, it's thought to be more beneficial to their well-being compared to them using social media for extending relationships beyond these circles, or in other words, making more online friends. This could be because of the different levels of social support that person gains from each of these type of social media use. Pantic, 2014. Equally, another type of social media use is called compensatory social media use, where the person sadly uses social media as the place where they make their social connections instead of forming real life connections, with it probably being no surprise whatsoever that this has unfortunately been associated with higher levels of depression. Whereas funting is where you use your phone in social contexts, which is being associated with feelings of exclusion and subsequent increased social media use. Then, because this person feels excluded, and using social media is linked to high rates of anxiety and depression. David and Roberts, 2020. So this relationship, I suppose, could be called as a sort of like being a vicious cycle, because someone might start feeling excluded and lonely, so they use social media more. Then this causes the loneliness to get worse. So that's exactly how complex this relationship is at times. And now that I've given you a thorough introduction that links social media to mental health and depression, now we really need to deep dive into this complex relationship, because I'm guessing now that now you're very interested in what these positives actually are. How could social media possibly benefit people with depression? So that's definitely the note that I ended that chapter with, and to be honest, that's probably the third or fourth chapter off the top of my head there. So we do cover some stuff beforehand, and then the chapter after actually outlines the rest of the book, but at least that entire idea of that social media and the relationship it has to mental health is not so straightforward. That is the real takeaway. So if you're interested in exploring more, then definitely check out the book. I really do recommend it. And if you know someone who will enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help us spread the word about the podcast. And definitely check out Social Media Psychology, a guide to clinical psychology, cyberpsychology, and depression. Available at all the usual places, and you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Conwhiteley. And definitely please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Link in the podcast description below. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.